Coming to you from the Freedom Federal Credit Union Studios, Harford County Living presents Conversations with Rich Bennett.
Slow pitch affairs
It's probably the least sexy part of the work, and I don't know how to answer. No. The truth is,
some wounds don't leave scars you can see. They show up in other ways. Anger that doesn't make sense, sadness you can't explain, or the feeling that no matter what you achieve, something inside still feels broken. For a lot of men, those wounds began in childhood. But instead of talking about them, they bury them for years, sometimes for decades. My guest today knows that journey all too well. At just 13 years old, Graham Robinson left home and school, carrying with him the invisible weight of childhood trauma. For years, he pushed forward, building a life and career in broadcasting and public service, all while the pain of his past remained buried beneath the surface. It wasn't until later in life that Graham began confronting those wounds head on and discovering just how deeply childhood trauma can shape our emotions, relationships, and identity. Today, Graham is a qualified hypnotherapist and trauma advocate, using both professional training and lived experience to help others confront shame, anger, and sadness rooted in their past. In his powerful memoir, Shattered Innocence, Healing the Invisible Wounds of Childhood Trauma, Graham opens up about the rage-filled childhood that forced him to grow up far too quickly and the long road toward reclaiming his true self. His message is simple but powerful. Healing may be painful, but it's possible. And no matter how many years have passed, it's never too late to begin. How you doing, Graham?
Good, thank you, Rich. What a wonderful introduction.
Oh,
thank you.
Yeah, it amazes me how many people don't talk about trauma, and we talk about a lot on the podcast, and it's true. A lot of it begins with early childhood.
Mm-hmm. In fact,
but it's
most,
amazing. Yeah, but it gets me is how many men don't like to talk about it, and that I don't understand.
It for many people, I find when it's funny when I go to a session and I might be talking to a mixed group of men and women, it's the women who will come up to me and say, "What you described is how my husband is, or parts of it," but the men don't approach me, and then when they see me talking to their wife or partner, the man will come up and then he'll start talking about it. But to break that initial, for many men to break that, to walk up and say, yes, this is what happens to me, seems really difficult, especially for older men. We've been conditioned really to tuck it away, you know, and you mentioned there about when we talk about coming from childhood, of course, for many of us, we don't even know that we're doing these bad things.
Right.
You know, that's the big problem. And we don't know it comes from childhood. Like, just because my father was physically beat me, I thought that was the biggest problem for me. But I rarely think about that. It's the emotional, the lack of love and the lack of emotion from your parents that really digs in deep. And that's what changes a child. More often than not, we can be naughty and we get smacked and whatever. We can live with that, and we can put that where it belongs. Even though it's abuse, it's still wrong.
Right.
But it's the emotional abuse that really we carry, and that really causes a lot of the problems. But we don't know that, because as kids, when the father or mother, or both in my case, they don't show any love. Now, they gave us everything else. They fed us, housed us, all of the things that you would ask to be done. But there was no emotion, no love in the house. And so what happens is the child does everything as you would expect to get that love. And we build a false, what they call a false self. So if a child says to itself, but we don't understand we're doing this, if a child says to itself, okay, they're not loving me, I'm not being loved, we create this false self that we hope will be loved. So it's this sort of different child this child becomes a different person. And that doesn't work either because, it's the adult that has the problem, not the kid. But
right.
And so that's when we start feeling we're not worthy because we're not loved, that we are shameful, we must be bad, because kids look at things in black and white, basically. It's either good or bad. So that's the core of what the development. It's toxic shame of us not being good enough. And that affects everything that you talked about, people pleasing, poor relationships with others, because we don't learn about relationships. Like I thought I had good relationships as an adult. Oh,
right.
I look back and I was shocking. I'm surprised women stayed more than 10 minutes with me. I mean, it was
wow.
No. I mean, my jealousy and my controlling and all of these things I was trying to do was just, when you look back, when I was doing it, and they would leave, I would blame them. I would say, well, it's their problem, not mine. They've gone. And then I would go in and do exactly the same stuff again. But I would never learn. I would never stop and say, hey, maybe you're doing something wrong. I would get really angry even with work colleagues because I was this silly perfectionist and unbelieved that I needed to control everything. So I was the only one who could do anything. So I would try and take control of everything. Of course, that's, it's just crazy. You can't do that. And also, you have to work with your colleagues and treat them properly. But I was shocking at times. You've been in radio, so I'll tell you this story, but at the end of it, please don't judge me and hang up. So I was a program director of a small radio station. So, I managed the music and the sound and the output.
Right.
And we're talking 90s here. And in those days, we had a company who would send us, I don't know if you remember the large reel-to-reel tapes.
Oh, my God, yes.
Yeah. So
that's how we learned how to edit.
Yeah, yes, I know. I was shocking on that, though. But they would send us these tapes with concerts on them, like live concerts on them. Yeah. So that would just be the one concert. And we had this, they've sent us this U2 concert. And there was a young announcer on air, and he was putting it to air, and it's lining it up, looping it up, and all that stuff. I was at home and I was listening because I'm a real U2 fan anyway. But he accidentally hit the fast forward button.
Oh God!
And yeah, exactly. And so it spun away, but because I'm was such a control freak then, and everything had to be right. Because if it wasn't, I would think people blame me.
Right.
I picked up the phone and I said to him, if you ever do that again, I'll break your bloody leg.
Damn.
Yeah. And that's how bad my anger, and that's how bad that was. And exactly, it's that sort of reaction that it doesn't even deserve being, somebody, I should have been dismissed immediately but that's how much the controlling and the need to be perfect takes hold of you. Now, it's just one of the symptoms, but that's how bad it can get. And you can do that with your loved ones. The only area I can be fortunate, I haven't been like that with my children. So for some reason, I don't know, my actions with my children were different to my actions elsewhere. And so which was fortunate, even though I have divorced and that hurt them, it's still, the matter was that they were treated properly. Whereas, your attitude towards others in your life can be shocking. I mean, I left my wife because I came home one day and I said to her, and this had been in my head for about a year, that I didn't feel like I belonged. So, and what I mean by that is that when you have this sort of trauma from childhood, and people listening to your podcast might recognize this in themselves. If I went to a party or even with good friends, really close friends, I'd still feel like I was alone. I'd stand in the corner. I'd move around the circle and talk, but I'd always feel alone. And I'd go home early more often than not and just feel safer at home. And that's what I did. And so I went to my wife then and said, look, I don't feel like I belong in the relationship. I don't feel like I belong here. I feel out of it. And that was happening more and more as I went home. And eventually I left. She looked at me and said, don't be stupid. What are you talking about? And that's, of course, the normal reaction. Like, what do you mean you don't feel like you belong? And we've been married 18 years. So,
Wow.
it's not like it happens instantly. It's this stuff comes, and I didn't know anything until I hit my 50s when it actually started to come out of me. And that's where I like to work, or why I like to work with older men, because it does start to come out from your mid-40s onwards. If you haven't done anything about it, you start to have these things come out of you. When I was working in radio, I worked for a national public broadcaster, and I was working in an area, of a regional area, sort of country towns around me, and we covered a large broadcast area. And there was this one small town, and this incident is just an example. Now, I don't know it's all related to childhood trauma, but I think a lot of it was.
Right.
So this man in this small country town, well-known member of a Lions group, which is a community group that helps people in Australia. He.
You mean Lions Club?
Yeah, Lions Club. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the president of ours.
Oh, cool. So you know how well respected people in the Lions Club are. So, so this, and he was been in this small country town, about 6,000 people, for a long time.
Wow.
He was babysitting his 2 grandchildren, and his wife was there, and his daughter was a serving police officer in the same town. He, I won't describe how, but he killed all 3. The wife, the wife and the 2 children. And he hadn't shown anything. Now, he hadn't shown anything like that in the town. When his daughter came home to collect the children, he was still in the house. He attacked her, but didn't kill her, and she was able to raise the alarm. But the thing that makes me think part of this is childhood trauma is he simply then, after his daughter had come home, he left the house, drove to a town nearby, walked into a pub, sat down and ordered a beer at the counter, and the barman, he was on, by that time it was on television, and the barman recognized him and called the police. But he was just calmly sitting there having a beer. And when he was interviewed by police and the stories came out, he was asked, and he said, I don't know why. I don't know why I did it.
Wow.
So the reason I talk about that connected now, I don't know if it's all totally connected to childhood trauma, but that is a bit of a symptom that does happen. You get it builds up in you so much that as you become, and he was in his 60s, so for example, your partner, his wife, there might have been one little thing or one thing that the child did that day that had been a repetitive thing that may have been happening for say 5 years with the child or with the wife. But that one day it's built so much up, like it builds and builds in him and he controls it, and then it builds and he pushes it down. That one day it just snaps and it explodes. And that trauma that's inside you comes out like a wild animal. It really does. It just explodes. And you also lose not only control, but you lose complete understanding of what you're doing. You can go into that. Now, there's no excuses for any of this, but what I'm saying is that without getting healing, men can be in this dangerous position. We see road rage today that comes out. It's young, not always older men, obviously, but it's that sort of symptom that, they want, on the road, you feel that somebody's done something to you, or you want to control it or whatever. And you go from 1 to 10 in rage without being able to control it, because it can trigger something in you from your childhood.
Wow.
And, I'm not a psychologist, so, you need to go, and people who've looked back at their childhood, whether you've had trauma, how it was, whether your father loved you. Did he ever say he was proud of you? If he didn't, we desperately want that validation. And if you feel those sorts of things, you need to go to a professional therapist and who deals in childhood trauma. And there are so many therapies on the market, as we all know, there's all sorts of therapies. So people can find one that suits them. The one that I feel works probably as well as any is a thing called CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. And that is for, if you've got a good expert with that's wonderful. And there's a thing called tapping, EFT.
Yes.
And that really works too. And that helps with survivors of PTSD and so on. Because childhood trauma, they call it CPTSD. So they call it complex post-traumatic disorder. Because the reason for that is the child's locked in the house, can't escape.
Right.
Whereas PTSD, even though you might be in a war zone for several years or a year, say, you do come out of it. So it's more incident based. But the symptoms are very similar, very similar.
Wow.
I mean, a PTSD veteran might be triggered by a car, by a helicopter flying overhead, or a loud noise, or any of those things that we talk about. Whereas for a child, it's more of a trigger of somebody saying or doing something. So, for example, for me, my parents just screamed at each other all the time. They never communicated very little communication was made in talking. So they just screamed. So I've always had a real issue with noise. Even next door neighbors, if they're talking on a veranda outside in their normal voice, I still cringe, or not so much now, but I used to cringe. I used to want to go over and tell them to be quiet, even in a normal conversation voice, because it just triggered me, because I'd lived under this house for years with them screaming at each other, and that noise, which until I understood it, I had arguments with neighbours about noise all the time until I understood what was going on in me, you know. And this is why but it's difficult, because we don't think we're flawed, you know. We think we're doing okay. We think we're good. I did, and as I've just said to you, you can see how ordinary I was. I wasn't good at all. So, you know, it's difficult though, because you've first got to admit you've got a problem, and then you've got to go and find a way to help it heal. And one of the first things I would recommend to anybody is talk to your partner about it. Because if they don't know your childhood, and, you know, we don't know our partner's childhoods unless we meet all their family and talk in depth with them, but often we don't. We just meet in social gatherings and keep it fun and light. So find out and talk to them, and that way you can support them. And you might understand too, because you would, you know, a partner will see these things happening.
Right. So what is it that helped you? Did you go to therapy, or was it a hypnotist? Is hypnotist the right word?
Hypnotherapy? No.
Okay.
No. Well, what happened? Like I was mid-50s, I think, when I was actually watching television one night. And I wasn't involved with anyone, just in my own apartment alone, and I started crying. And I started crying because a man put an arm around his son's shoulder and told him he was proud of him. And now I'd seen that for years on different, but this one time, this is what I mean. It comes out at certain times. This one time, I just started crying, and I ended up lying on the floor, curled up, just sobbing, literally.
Wow.
And, you know, and here's this. If anybody's seen me, this 50+ old man lying on what the hell's going on? And so it also worried me. It scared me. And so
I bet.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know what was happening, and I knew that my father didn't show love, and I later on found out why. But the trouble was that I didn't at that stage understand what it had done to me. Because I didn't have a very good as you mentioned, I left home at 13 and left school and went off, so I didn't have really a good relationship with my parents, and because I never lived with them after that. So once this happened, I started looking. Unfortunately, we have Google and the internet, and so I started looking into what would cause that, and then all this information started to come up. And as I read through, I recognized the symptoms of what I was doing in different areas too, like people pleasing, or listening to your inner voice that tells you you're not good enough and you can't do things. And so all of these stories came up. So I realized I needed to get help. And I've got to be honest with you, I believe Well, I want to believe in this. I believe the universe gives us things when we're ready to deal with them. And so
I agree.
somebody came along, a lady came along I heard from someone about this lady who did work as in EFT, in the tapping. And so I reached out to her and I started seeing her first on a weekly basis. And the first couple of sessions, she was, you can't go straight to the depth. She was quite gentle.
Right.
But then we started exploring the inner child and she got me. So the idea is you have to reparent your inner child. And so she got me to meet my inner child and to talk to them. And there were some very, very big emotions that came out. And we worked through that for, I think and she's a good friend now, about 2.5 years of work. Not weekly. It went from weekly to fortnightly, then to monthly, and slowly moved away. But the interesting thing is that when we start doing the work, I always believed that. So what happened? The first incident with my father was when I was 5. I stole a couple of toy helicopters from a little shop at a beachside place, and we were at for the day. And I put them in. I was playing with them, and I put them in my pocket because I loved them. The whir of the helicopter blades. Anyway, I played with them in the car on the way home, and he saw that, and he pulled over in this near this forest, and he took me out of the car, and he took off his belt. And he started whipping me, and I was I remember running through, trying to run away from him, and he's chasing me. So I always thought that was what started it. But when I did the work, I found that the real depth of my pain came from, and it's quite a simple matter. I was about 6, I suppose, in school, and I won 3rd prize in an art competition out of the whole school, a drawing of the Beatles.
Nice.
So they were doing a nighttime presentation in the auditorium. I went, but nobody turned up for me, no parents.
Oh.
So, and I'm watching all these other kids on stage getting their things, and I couldn't even go up. Even now it makes me sad. So but I found out, I didn't think that, I dismissed that. I never even thought about it. But that was that was the key, that really sort of the depth of the trauma.
Right.
And once she got into that and we started opening that up, even though it now makes me sad, I understand it. And then you start doing more work. And then I started looking at my family. And I found out that my father's mother died in childbirth in the 1930s or somewhere around there, and she
giving
died
birth to him.
No, giving birth to a little girl, to what would have been his sister. And on the kitchen floor, there was nobody around.
Oh my God!
Yeah, there was nobody around, and so his father, who was a coal miner, gave him and another his sister away to some other relatives, and never ever contacted them again. So he was just given away, and the relatives they were given to were quite. Like this was in England, they were quite austere, that sort of Victorian, imagine that Victorian era type attitude, very, very straight. So when I started to learn about that, I started to understand that he never was given love. You can imagine this little kid, from what I'm gathering, we met their family many years later. My sister found them. She did a Google and genealogy and so on. And she found them, and he went back and met sisters he'd never known he'd had, and all the rest of it. So you start to understand that, it's not all black and white, that they were just bad people or whatever. They had their own trauma. And that's the other thing. We all have intergenerational trauma that comes through from, and his father was obviously a pretty awful man as well. And so that went through and through. So, yeah, it's once you start opening the can, though, you can start to heal. Even though you might not like what's in there, but it's the only way to heal.
It helps make sense.
Yeah, and of course, we all know that you if you put sunlight on something, it starts to get better. So you've got to open it up. You've got to talk about it, because if you don't, you really, your life will get worse and worse if it starts. Now, I'm sure some people go through trauma and it doesn't affect them, or we're not all affected the same way. That's
Right.
for sure. But it often reminds me, you had that famous case in America of those two young men who
The brothers that killed the parents.
Yeah.
Menendez, I think it was.
Yeah. And I feel I've got to be honest, and I don't want to. I know people have different views, but I feel really sorry for them, really sad about what's happened to them, because I would 100% say that what happened to them as kids and young men, and their reactions is very, very typical of extreme childhood trauma. So, sexual abuse is by far the worst, of course. That right. Really is by far the worst. And when I remember reading the story, and of course I've seen the documentaries, when people talk about, well, why did they go back and shoot the mother so badly? So it's because she didn't protect them.
Right.
So if, their loss, the father was, even though he was doing the abuse, this is my opinion, and I'm not a psychologist or any of that, even though he was obviously doing the physical actions towards the young boys, the mother, the things they would have seen, because she didn't stop him, because she knew about it, and it's obvious that you have to know about it in a home like that. That's why that depth of anger and sadness and trauma is focused on the mother, not the father as much. He's secondary, even though he was the perpetrator. And that's why they would have gone back, and that's why it was that was releasing that. And but, unfortunately, like all things, no, I don't think, especially in their time, we didn't look into childhood trauma as much. And yet America has one of the very, everybody's talked about childhood trauma over the years, but there was an American called John Bradshaw who wrote some of the best books he's passed away now, but in the 80s, he wrote some amazing books one called Homecoming. He talked and about shame, about childhood trauma. And if anybody really wants to get, and here's another reason why I started to understand what happened to me, I picked up his book. If anybody really wants to understand their childhood trauma and how it comes out, I would highly recommend looking for John Bradshaw's Homecoming. It really, it goes through all of the things that can happen and talks about how and why. And it's a very, very clear picture. And when I read that, I finished reading it and I remember putting it down and going, so that's why I have these problems. I knew he pinpointed all of them and I knew why. And it's, and he had his own problems too. He's an alcoholic and did things as well. So he understood that lived experience.
Right.
But it's important that people just realize what's going on and understand that they do something.
It's amazing because a lot of people, and I'm thinking like with the Menendez brothers, a lot of people don't look into the deeper part of it. What caused it. One, I guess it's a docuseries I just watched, was the Ed Gein story.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And just to see everything that he went through and the stuff that he did, it's like almost like he wasn't there. He doesn't remember a lot of it. And it's unreal. Well, it's not unreal. It's because a lot of people that it's stuck in your, well, this, it's stuck in your brain and it's stuck there because you want to forget about it. You do forget about it. And like you said, you hit a certain age and it starts bringing back memories. And this is one of the reasons I always tell her it's not a bad idea for everybody to see a therapist. Not a bad idea at all, because you may uncover something that you did not know was there. And it may prevent something from the future happening, which is important.
Especially younger men. I like it when I'm talking to younger men and to be quite honest, I would love to talk about a lot of this to school young schoolboys.
Oh, yes.
Not super young, but, when they're getting into their last 3 or 4 years of schooling, and talk to them about, you obviously moderate it a bit, but talk to them about the need to make sure that if they did have trauma in their lives, even bullying. I was talking to a friend of mine whose son has been bullied at one school. She's moved him to another. He's doing so much better now. But all of the things that are happening, it isn't just childhood trauma from parents and that, it's childhood trauma from bullying and from other things. If you can get to talk to young men, but as you say, even as in their 20s and 30s, if they can start acting upon getting therapy, getting to talk to somebody and helping it, their lives, my life is so much different from 5-7 years ago when I would never have been here talking to you about this, and I was not a nice person at all. I didn't realize that, though. I mean, I still had friends, and I was very good to my friends, and they were good to me. But when it got into those moments of stress and pressure, I reacted very badly, and anything could happen. So you really need to get. I agree with you, to get to talk to somebody who understands how to help you and what's happening. And it doesn't have to be therapy for the rest of your life. You just need to be aware of it. And once you're aware of it, there's a lot of things you can do to help your own childhood trauma. Simple exercises, even things like meditation, but more importantly, just understanding that it's there. And when the anxieties rise up, you can do simple things like put your hand on your stomach and take some deep, slow breaths. That'll bring you back down, and it'll stop you if you want to. Take me, for example. If I want to go racing across to the neighbor and say, turn the car horn off or whatever, it'll stop me from doing that. So I just do that.
Right.
If I get anxious now, I just do that. And quite interestingly, it calms you down. The other thing with anger, because my anger, once it starts to take root, it boils, as you know, and comes up. I give my anger a name. So I call it George.
I like that idea.
And so when George plays up, I just say, "No, George, we're not doing that." And what happens is you just break that cycle of building it up. So you don't say it out loud. I just say it in my head. I say, "No, George, we're not." And it stops. And because you name it, you can actually directly speak to your anger. Whereas if I said, no, anger, I don't want you to do anything, it doesn't feel like it's effective. That's not going to work for me, or it doesn't work for me. So I had to name it. And yes, it does work. Now, I'm not saying it'll work for everybody, and not maybe in all occasions, but it will certainly keep you from, even in the car, if somebody does something that, makes you angry and you want to chase after them, just say no, give it a name and say no. And you'll be surprised how quickly your body will come back to present. But yes, you're right. People need to go and talk to someone. It's not just talk. You can, there's other things you do, but you need to open up about it, because once you do, you will see all the things that plague you.
You're listening to Conversations with Rich Bennett. We'll be right back. I've always said trust matters, especially when you're investing in your home. And that's exactly why, when it comes time for me to replace my windows and doors, I'm going with Bel Air Window and Door, your local window depot. They're a family-owned business right here in our community, and what I love is they combine top-quality products with honest, no-pressure service. I've done my homework, and their triple-pane windows really stood out to me. Better energy efficiency, less outside noise, and just an overall upgrade you can feel. And their doors, whether you're looking for something durable, secure, or just want to boost your home's curb appeal, they've got options that really make a difference. For me, it comes down to trust, and I really trust Bel Air Window and Door to get it done right. If you're thinking about upgrading your home, give them a call at 410-941-3499 or visit their website at belairwindowanddoor.com. Tell them Rich sent you. Did you start meditating after you found out or
Yeah.
before?
No, after.
After.
Yeah, I was like, I've always believed in meditation and other things, but I'm one of those people who sort of doesn't seem to put the time aside into those. Like, I'll put time aside into I like listening to music. I'll sit there and listen to music, which I think is the most beneficial
Very
thing
good
you can
therapy.
do.
Yes.
Absolutely. That and art. If you're even if you're not a
Yes.
painter or whatever, just do some artwork. You can't get a third prize with the Beatles picture like I did, and can't get that good. But but do artwork as well, and that's really great therapy. But for
And
me,
even journaling.
writing was a bit of a therapy for me. But like you, I like talking as well. I like talking about it. Even though I do notice that when I talk about it, afterwards, I'm always quite exhausted. So I think there's still a lot of emotion involved in that you have to work through.
But you probably feel good too, right?
Yeah. It's nice to, and even with the books, the first question with the two books was that somebody said, well, that must have, helped you get rid of all the stuff that was going on. It didn't actually.
Not all of it, no.
No. And it was, the first book is a sort of a bit of a boy's own. It's just about the journey from 13 and all the things that happened. And it didn't talk about the healing stuff. So it was more, like we talked, like you said, meditation. It came once I realized how important to sort of calm your mind. Because one of the things with childhood trauma, we are hyper vigilant. We're always scanning for danger. Even now, I scan for danger when I go into a restaurant and sit down. I don't mean danger, but I look around to see who's there, and I need to know what's around me. And the reason for that is because our inner child was always scared, and so it was also always fearful. So it hid because of everything that was happening to it.
I'm the same way. Whenever we go out to eat somewhere. But I think it's mainly because I'm looking out for other people. And because this didn't start till I was in the Marine Corps. I'll never sit with my back towards the door because I always want to be aware. And especially if I have one of my kids with me, I definitely want to be aware. And if I could see what's coming through the door, if I could sense danger, it's a lot easier for me to protect them than if my back's towards it.
Yeah, and but that still is a from your service you learn, but it's in a sense it is somewhat similar in that the inner child is a bit like that too. It needs to be wherever it is, it needs to be safe, and so so for me when I was in my home, my family home, my safety was outside. I would go out and play in the fields in winter in the UK. We lived in Africa for a few years. I would go and play in the bush in Africa. Now, we weren't near lions or that in near the cities and towns, but there were lots of snakes and other things around. But I would be much happier out in the bush playing than because home was dangerous for me. When I was home, I had to walk on eggshells. So, we learn these things to adapt and survive. And it's like, servicemen and women who know that, danger comes. You don't want your back facing the door, do you? You want either the wall behind you or people won't sit in a corner where they can't have movement away or whatever, or they sit near a door so they've got another exit. We all have these because our if it's not childhood trauma, it's our actual bodies and minds saying that we don't want to be in a position where we're unsafe.
Exactly.
But it does. I mean, we do all these we learn these behaviors and they become automatic. One of the things, this didn't really have anything to do with childhood trauma, but when I left home, I went to a major city in Australia called Sydney, and I went from a small town to a big town. And the friend I went with ended up leaving and taking all the money. So I was pretty broke, and I only had about 1 or 2 nights in this sort of flea-bitten hotel. But one of the things in those days, and we're going back to the 70s now, in those days in this city, you could get little restaurants had $5 Australian dollars, $5 meals, and it would be cup of tea, slice of bread, your roast dinner, so roast was fairly easy for them, I guess, and ice cream afterwards. And so I remember that with a friend of mine who I met in those times, we would go to those when we had enough money. And even today, and then we would eat it so quickly, like as if somebody would come and steal it off the plate.
Uh-huh.
And even today, I'll go to a restaurant with somebody and I will finish well before everybody else. I just can't. It's like that inbred thing. I must finish my food quickly in case somebody takes it. It's ridiculous because I'm sitting with adults, but that's what happens.
My wife gets on me about that all the time. She's like, you eat too fast. But again, and that I can tell you for a fact, that was not from childhood, because I'll never forget this. Sitting at the dinner table, you could not get up from the table until the last person finished eating. And my younger brother was always the last, because I swear I think he chewed everything 100 times. He definitely chewed a lot, and we'd have to wait. But when I went in the Marine Corps, if you were the last one in line, you were finished when the drill instructor was finished. So you had to hurry up and shovel that stuff down, which I want to talk to more people that were in the Marine Corps to find out if they get heartburn a lot. But yeah, it's just, I'm still trying to slow down so I can taste it.
That's the other thing. Yes, you don't taste, do you? You just put it in and finish it. And that's a great analogy, though. I mean, you would know if you were just getting your food and you're watching your drill sergeant halfway through his, then you go, bugger, I've got to eat quick. I've got to eat on the way to the table. Because otherwise, you don't have a choice. But these things become so ingrained. So part of our psyche, and that's what happens with childhood trauma. When you're in a service, the things you would see and the things that happen, it becomes so part of our psyche that sometimes we even forget that it's so deep inside us that it becomes part of who and what we are. And again, your point about therapy, all of those things, talking to somebody else, talking to a professional, I think, really helps. And talking to your partner too, letting them know that's why it may happen.
Is that one of the reasons you became a hypnotherapist?
So I wanted to find a skill that could help people as well as talk to them, because, yes, I can go and talk to a group of men and do something, but I also wanted to offer something for others who I would come in contact with if they had issues and were looking for a therapy. And I studied NLP for a little while, neuro-linguistic programming, I think it is. But as part of that, it had a very small hypnotherapy section. But NLP left me feeling a bit untouched, to be honest. I wasn't that big a fan. But the hypnotherapy part of it really struck with me. So I then decided to study that and be be able to practice that if I wanted to. I don't practice that as much. I do like CBT, as I mentioned earlier, the cognitive behavioral therapy. I do like that, but I have to get more. I have to basically get licensed to do that.
But is that what you're doing now? Is you're helping? Because you're not in broadcasting anymore, correct?
No. I left broadcasting some time ago. Although I was doing some community radio for a while and some of that stuff. And mainly it is either talking on podcasts. I do my own YouTube videos on elements of trauma, of the childhood trauma. And so I'm not sometimes, and again, this is part of the trauma. I think sometimes you feel guilty about taking money from people who are in trauma when you help them. Do you know what I mean? Like there's a little bit of, look, I don't really want to charge you. Like, it's like the books. I give the books away for free pretty much most of the time. Like, I'll go to a market and I'll and somebody will come up and say, oh, sorry, I don't have any because I cash or whatever on me. I say, here, take it. It's, the point. I know. It's. I mean, I don't give them all away, but the point is that for me, a lot of it is about. I just want to talk about it and raise awareness with whomever I can. So yeah, no, go on. Tell me.
Oh, no. What I was going to say is, but I bet you are, from the books you give away and the people you talk to, you're probably getting more feedback and thank yous for helping them, which to me is a bigger reward than them handing you money for it.
Yeah. And
correct?
You're right. Yeah, absolutely. And feeling that it's also that somebody will read the book and even parts of it. I mean, you don't have to read anything from cover to cover, but reading it and get an understanding. A lot of women buy the book if I'm at a market or somewhere.
Right.
They really do. And I think they buy it for their husbands. And I remember one lady at a market, she was with her husband and she waited till he was looking at another stall, and then she came over and she sort of took the book. She didn't want him to see her buying it. I think because she was very quickly put it in a bag and so on. So I think she wanted to read it. I talked to her a little bit. I got the impression she wanted to read it to understand what her husband was like.
Okay.
Because she mentioned to me that when we were talking about it, she said, "Oh, he does some of those things." And so I think that so people do it in different ways. But you're right. I like to feel that. That in some way it helps. And yes, that feeling is good if just one person says, "Hey, this helped me," or I got something out of it. It's good. It's, I think 95 to 96% of us on this earth have had some sort of trauma, and many of us childhood trauma. It's very prevalent. So, and the statistics, unfortunately, for older men after 70 taking their own lives is growing and growing. So, it's not all childhood trauma, of course. There's health reasons, there's financial reasons, there's even romantic reasons, possibly feeling alone and whatever. But childhood trauma certainly plays its role within that because stuff comes out of us and we don't know what to do with it. We don't know what's going on.
Actually, with childhood trauma, what are some of the biggest misconceptions out there?
I would suggest that that the answer is I don't have it. It wasn't a problem. My dad smacked me and that was fine. It's not fine because even though you might think it didn't physically have a problem for you as a child, it did alter your psyche in some way. And the other one is that I can't really heal it now. I'm too old. That sort of comment I've heard a couple of times from people who come up to me and say, "Oh, look, I've been like this for 40 years. No point changing now." And I say, "Well, what do you mean?" And he said, "Oh, well, I'm always grumpy and I yell at the wife when she does this or at the grandkids." And I say, "Well, we can get rid of all that, to a certain extent because there's a reason you're yelling at them. Something's triggering in you. It's not just because we're not born grumpy people. We're not born horrible people, or with that in mind. So those are the two things that tend to come up the most. The whole term inner child and seems to have there's so much talk about it that a lot of people have seemed to turn away from it as well, turn away from the idea, which is a shame because it's actually a genuine thing. We all have an inner child.
Yes.
And for childhood trauma survivors, it's damaged. It's a damaged inner child, and you do have to reparent it. And when I talk to somebody about and I can show them how to do it as well, but how to go inside and talk to their inner child, I can see in their eyes and on their face, "Oh, what's this idiot talking about? What's he going on about?" I can see it. I can see what they're thinking. And so you have to explain that, about the inner child, the reason it's damaged and so on. So people struggle, especially men, struggle to come to that concept and struggle to work with it because for them, I think they see it as a weakness. they see it being weak for having to think and do those things. I could be wrong. Not all men
I agree with you there. I do believe a lot of men feel that way. However, I think I look at it differently. I think it's a strength.
I do.
You have to be strong to reach out to talk to people to find help. It's a weakness if you don't seek help.
Yeah, because you just have to look at what you're doing to people around you.
Yeah.
Not even to yourself, and yourself is struggling, because there have been many studies, and there are a lot of people in the US who have talked about this, the physical impact of childhood trauma on the body. It shows that people who've had childhood trauma have high incidences of cancer, diabetes, strokes, and those sorts of things are much higher than the studies they've done than those who don't suffer childhood trauma. So there is a physical impact on us as well. And because it sits in the nervous system, it sits in your body. And you can imagine if you've got this horrible stuff sitting in you, of course it's going to affect your body. So there's a good practical reason as well to start doing it, because the interesting thing is once you start to release, as you would know, Rich, once you start to release these emotions, you feel lighter. It lightens your body. Yes. And it goes. So, and it lightens your entire body, because we're talking about it in your entire nervous system. So it's throughout your body. And it's just a matter of once that starts to go, your body feels better physically as well as emotionally. So there's very good practical reasons to look into whether, you had childhood trauma and talk to somebody.
I think the other thing is too, and all you men out there that are listening to this, I want you to listen really hard to this. And if you never talk to somebody, please do. And when I say strength, here it is, Graham, you're helping people that have gone through the same thing. Years ago, when I mentioned about now mine wasn't childhood trauma, but I had sexual abuse trauma from when I was in the Corps, and bottled it up until, oh my God, 5 years ago, maybe, is when I finally talked about it. And it felt like a ton of bricks being lifted off my shoulders. And I didn't talk about it on my podcast. I was on somebody else's podcast and talked about it, and I shared it. And the people that reached out and thanked me, because the same thing had happened to them, either as a child or even as a young adult, and they didn't know how to talk about it. And now they are. And the same thing, they said it felt like a ton of bricks being lifted off their shoulders. You feel, I wouldn't say almost like more at peace. Does that make sense?
Because you are. I think your body is at peace because, as I said earlier, sexual abuse is by far the worst thing, whether it happens to you as a child or as an adult, or male or female, by far the worst thing. If you're talking about servicemen or women where it's happened to, of course, servicemen and women have a very powerful and strong attitude. We're strong individuals. That's why we're in the service. We're built like that. That's how we feel. And so to talk about something like that is, it's amazing that you were able to share that, because then that relief is just amazing. The fact that you've been holding it so tightly, which is what you do, and then the day when you start to talk and that bottle, that release opens up, and it's like a balloon with a leak, and then suddenly that it's open and the air goes out, and that whole pain. Now, it doesn't all disappear, as you would know, completely. There are still things that you have to do, and it's still there, but it's there now, manageable.
Exactly.
You know it's there. You know what happened. You can talk about it and you dislike what happened and all the rest of it, but you can manage it. Whereas before it was, it's a lump in your chest or in your stomach that stays there forever. And it is amazing when people open up and talk about it. And it helps. Yeah, it really helps. And even if you're just talking to a friend,
Uh-huh.
and tell them about that. Something like that happened to me when I was a kid at 13. I never told anybody until I met one lady that I did fall madly in love with, and then one night I told her. But she was the only one. Until I wrote the book, she was the only one that ever knew. So, we do bottle all this stuff up, and it's like anything. It's just not healthy. And yes, you do feel good when it comes out. It's just like, it's just like I've got that off my chest, and it's a simple saying, but it's true. Getting it off your chest it's like when you talk to a friend and you're honest with them about something they've done that's hurt you, and you walk away. You may lose your friend even, but getting it off your chest, as long as you do it properly, politely, and you're genuine, then it's such a good thing to do.
Yes. Yeah. You may be saving a friend's life. You never know.
Yes.
You never know.
There was a discussion once I was reading that with this work with childhood trauma, you might just work with one person and help them, and that one person could go on to help millions, or they could go on to hurt millions, depending on which road they take.
Which way,
Yeah. So, you don't know, just because you say to yourself, well, only one person responded to that. That one person could change the world. That one person could be anything. So it doesn't matter as long as you get to one person and it moves. And it's like a stone in a pond. It's a ripple effect.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Now, any plans on a third book?
No.
Or are you just sticking with the two?
Yeah. I think I've written about me enough. I'm actually looking at writing a mystery crime series. When I mentioned my father's mother died in childbirth.
Right.
So this is what started me on this other new writing project. So I went to visit my sister who lives a couple of 1,000 kilometers from me. So I guess that's about 1,000 miles or so from me. But she's the one who did all this work on my father and got all these documents. And she showed me a picture of my grandmother's grave. And on the grave below it was the name of the child that died, that they'd named it, and it was called Ruby. And so when I came back, I was just in bed one night and I was just thinking about, because I like writing, and I thought, why not try and honor Ruby by writing a mystery detective type book, but I'm going to set it in the 1930s, just as the Great Depression begins. And Ruby's one of the main characters in the book, and so I'm going to put her in the book. But her background will be that her mother died in childbirth and so on. So she's still going to carry that trauma in. I think I've written enough about myself. That's done and dusted, Rich. It's gathering in the $2 basement box in the bookshops now.
Oh, jeez. Well, for those of you listening, 2 books, Pain, Loss, and Desire, and then the newest book, Shattered Innocence, which you can find on Graham's website, GrahamRobinsonWellness.com, or on Amazon, probably Barnes & Noble, wherever you can find books. And you know what I'm going to say? Once you order them and read them, leave a full review and purchase copies for other people. Well, Graham, I already took one thing away from you. I already gave the website away, but how can people follow you?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's if they want to hear more about childhood trauma, and some people can't be bothered reading or don't like to read, they can also check out my YouTube channel, which is just Graham Robinson Wellness too. And I'm trying now to try and do a subject per week or so on and post it, but just on one topic. When I wrote the second book, I ended up thinking I wrote about 19 odd different ways that I've been affected by childhood trauma, and that's where I stopped. There are probably still more. So it's amazing how many different ways it can impact on you, and
Oh yeah.
and so that as well. But yeah, look, thank you for that. That's great. Thank you for the plug.
And people, you can also follow him on Amazon. That way, when he releases this other book about Ruby and this mystery one, you'll know right away because, you'll get notified, which I love that. I don't even know if a lot of authors know that they could follow you on Amazon.
Yeah.
Are notified when new releases are coming out.
I didn't know that, but yeah. I mean, I'm a terrible marketer. I've got to say, it's my weakness.
Well, that's all right, because when we're finished here, I'm going to talk to you about something else, which I think will help with the marketing part. Okay. And it's free. That's even better. So, but before I get to my last question, is there anything you would like to add?
No, I think you pretty much have covered it with me. The only thing I would just reiterate what you said. I think it was probably the best thing. Go and talk to someone, get some therapy. Mm-hmm. Just do something for yourself. It's for you. Ultimately, it will help everybody around you. But look, I would like to say with hand on my heart that it has made me such a different person. And I wish I would still have a marriage. I would still be living in the same house with my wife, and hopefully even, although my children have grown up, they would come home every Christmas and I would be with them. That would be my ideal life. And I still believe I would have that if I'd done something about my childhood trauma early on. I didn't realize what I was doing or saying or why. It was just in me. And I never even looked at it, why it was happening. So yeah, wow. It really, that's the one thing that I think I would like to leave people with. As you said, go and talk to someone, get some therapy.
Well, now you get to pick the question. So pick a number between 1 and 5.
Okay.
Well, you got to tell me the number, of course.
Yeah, I'm going to go number 3.
Number 3. Yeah. Okay. Now pick a number between 41 and 60.
60.
60. All right. Here's what? I got 100 different questions here, and most of the time they align with what we've been talking about. And I think this does. What's a moment you experienced profound gratitude?
I think when I released the books, I sent copies to my children. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, the book, both books hold some pretty horrible things that I've done, including, as a kid being raped, but then the things I did as an adult. And so they're not things to be proud of. So, in some ways I thought about, do I want my children, and I've got 2 daughters and a son, do I want them to read this? But the response from my children made me grateful that I did do that, that I didn't hide anything from them, that they know who I am. My relationship with them is good, even though I left my marriage.
Right.
And some of them have lived with me previously after that. But I was so grateful that I did make that decision and not try and hide it from them, not just publish it and not tell them, because they wouldn't have found them. They wouldn't have been looking for them. And that I've actually been able to honestly have those conversations with them about what happened. Now, I don't think they fully understand the depth of trauma. Right. I don't think they have gone, but they know what happened and they know what I've gone through, and they have a very different view of me now. So I'm eternally grateful to them for that.
Nice.
But yeah, that's probably where I think I am.
Great. Well, Graham, I want to thank you so much. It's been an honor. Those of you, again, when you purchase the books, don't forget to leave a full review and purchase copies for everybody else that you know, because I guarantee you everybody needs help one way or another, or they know somebody that does. So these also make great gifts. Graham, thanks so much.
Rich, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You know, conversations like this actually stay with you because what Graham shared isn't just his story. It's something a lot of people are quietly carrying. The anger that shows up out of nowhere, the feeling of not belonging, even when you're surrounded by people, that voice in your head telling you you're not good enough. And for so many, it all traces back to something they've never talked about. What really hit me during this conversation is something Graham said, that a lot of us don't even realize what's affecting us until it finally comes to the surface. And when it does, it can feel overwhelming. But it can also be the beginning of something better. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means understanding. It means facing it so it no longer controls you. And maybe the biggest takeaway from all of this is simple. You don't have to carry it alone. Whether that's talking to a therapist, opening up to someone you trust, or even just starting to acknowledge it for yourself. That first step matters more than you think. Graham's journey is proof that no matter how long you've carried something, it's never too late to start healing. So if this conversation resonated with you, I encourage you, don't ignore that feeling. Do something with it. And if you know someone who might need to hear this, share this episode with them. Because one conversation, one moment of honesty can change everything. I want to thank Graham Robinson for coming on and being as open and real as he was. Make sure you check out his book, Shattered Innocence, and connect with him online. And as always, thank you for listening. Until next time, keep the conversation going.